Welcome to LNN Spotlight, a podcast by the Latino News Network. LNN is dedicated to best serving Hispanic Latinos with local multimedia news and information websites across the U.S. I'm Belén Dumont, reporter-editor for the Latino News Network and your host. Our coverage explores how democracy works and breaks down complicated political processes for our audiences. Today's episode will explore how residents, particularly voters aged 50 and over, should prepare for Election Day and the types of resources that are available to them. Today, we are joined by AARP Rhode Island State Director Catherine Taylor and State President Elizabeth Howlett. Catherine and Elizabeth, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Belén. It's so nice to be on this with you.
Yes, it is.
I'm excited for our conversation. So this election season, there's a lot of information going around and it can be overwhelming. So AARP Rhode Island has released its 2024 voter guide. I was wondering what kind of does it cover and what are some key takeaways?
Sure. And I think before we start, I just want to share that AARP's mission is to empower people to choose how we live as we age. And nothing is more important to that empowerment than your vote. You know, being able to vote for who's going to carry out policies that will make our lives better, 50 plus. So that's why AARP Rhode Island and AARP nationally is so heavily engaged in voter engagement efforts to make sure that people know how, where, and when to vote. So we've developed a voter guide that is on our website at aarp.org/rivotes, all the trusted information that you need, key deadlines, how to vote, all of that. And we work, just so everyone knows, really closely with the Rhode Island Secretary of State's office. So the information on our website is identical to the information on their website. It's very thorough, it's very trusted, and they're a good partner.
And here's what people, this is great timing, because here's what people should do soon. Go on the Secretary of State's website, which is sos.ri.gov, because there's some deadlines coming up. October 15th, if you happen to be someone who has a mail ballot, those need to be sent in. And then on the 16th of October, early voting starts. So every community in Rhode Island has early voting, which is a great thing for people whose work or childcare or other kinds of responsibilities make it difficult to vote on Election Day. So call your city or town hall. In most of them, you can vote there and just stop in during the day. In some places, they may have it set up somewhere else. So early voting is really important and is available from the 16th of October through the 4th, the day before Election Day. And then, of course, there's Election Day. So when you go on the Secretary of State's website, make sure to check where you vote. Sometimes polling places change. And I know in my neighborhood, I voted 3 different places during the time I lived in my neighborhood. So it's always good to check every election year.
Absolutely. And again, apply for a mail ballot by the 15th. And if for some reason you miss the 6th and you find out that you're not registered, you won't be able to vote for Congress or for any local races or for ballot initiatives, but you still can vote for president with a provisional ballot. So if for some reason, you've forgotten to register, still show up on Election Day and you will be allowed to vote just for the presidential race.
These are amazing reminders. I really appreciate that. We've had the pleasure of being able to speak with the Secretary of State's office as well. And the work that, in partnership you're all doing is fantastic. A big part of it is reaching out and giving correct information because there's a lot out there. So next, I was wondering if we could discuss the potential voter power of voters aged 50 and over. So Catherine, I know you have some statistics or some information. I was wondering if you could share that about this really important population.
Sure. Thank you, Belén. And you said potential power. I would say it's power. The power is very, very real because voters 50 plus really do decide elections. We've been learning that time and time again. And actually in our Rhode Island office, we've been analyzing the voter data over the last couple of years. And last year, when we weren't supposed to have an election, but in the first congressional district, we did have a special election. I will share that in the primary, 72% of people who showed up to vote were over 50, 70%. And just as many people over 85 voted as under 30. So consider that.
So what are some important issues on the minds of older voters, you would say, from your experience and expertise?
So I think We've actually not just experience and expertise, but also some real polling to look at what our members and older adults in general care about. And one is Social Security, most definitely. There's a lot of awareness, and I've got a 32-year-old son who will tell you, oh, I know I'm never getting it, right? There's a lot of awareness for people who are older and younger, and my 32-year-old son is wrong. He will get Social Security, but we also need to elect officials who are going to protect it and make sure it is there for those of us who are older and for the younger people in our country as they age. So that's a really important issue. Another one is caregiving, and it's one that we all talk about in our regular lives, because most of us, I know I helped care for my mother before she passed away, along with my 3 sisters. We talk about it, but we don't hear our politicians talk about it very much. And one thing we've discovered is that government can help people as we are dealing with these burdens, and they're burdens we take on willingly, but government can make it easier. Some is with some proposed tax credits that are being discussed at the state and federal level. Some is having the government bureaucracy a little easier to work with when you're trying to care for someone, but they tell you, oh no, I'm sorry, we can't give you that information. So there's a lot of ways that politicians can talk to us as they're campaigning and show us they understand, and then when they get elected, do some things to make our lives easier as we're caregivers. It's about 20% of our voting population are caregivers. Have I got that number right?
121,000 Rhode Islanders are currently family caregivers, providing something like $2 billion worth of unpaid care every year. Very, very powerful. And as Elizabeth mentioned, in the context of helping with tax credits to ease the financial burden, families spend an average of more, or family caregivers spend an average of more than $7,000 a year out of pocket on their caregiving responsibilities. So this is an area where government really can be helpful, and politicians can be helpful in talking about caregiving, because those of us who are family caregivers don't necessarily identify ourselves as family caregivers. We're just doing our job. We're just helping our mom out. We're just, taking care of our disabled spouse. We're just being a good family member. But we have, significant burdens and responsibilities that we can really use help with.
That's really well said. Right. There's not necessarily a standard definition at times, and it's not really obvious what that kind of looks like, or how that kind of process can happen. So I do appreciate you emphasizing the role that government really has in supporting these residents. I have a good amount of my family members have been a caregiver at one point, and I probably will be myself, and that's something that I'm looking forward to. But right, I think the external support makes such a difference within that.
And one of the ways that we work to be effective as AARP Rhode Island to ensure that our elected officials and our candidates understand our issues is part of our voter engagement work is actually to invite candidates for office to come to our office, and we sit with them from both parties, everybody in every race right now. We've spoke to everybody who is running for federal office this year. When we have statewide offices, we talk to the statewide candidates. Occasionally, we'll talk to mayoral candidates if it's a contested election, and we want to talk about our livability issues on the local level. And we tell them, we show them the polling, we show them what people 50 plus, care about, and what will make us vote for a candidate. And we also share the statistics that I shared with you and with everybody watching about what percentage of the electorate is over 50, so that they understand we're paying attention to what they're saying and we're going to vote. And it really helps us with, accomplish our agenda of policy change that makes lives better, makes our lives better as people over 50.
Following with that, I was wondering what are some common voting barriers specifically that Rhode Island older residents may have faced, and sort of what kind of efforts AARP Rhode Island or partner organizations have taken to address these challenges.
Yeah, I think sort of like to answer that in reverse would be probably helpful, because in 2022, AARP Rhode Island, with an enormous coalition of partner organizations, including the Economic Progress Institute and the ACLU and NAACP and the Latino Policy Institute, Common Cause, were able to pass the Let RI Vote Act, which had a number of changes to how we vote that really opened things up for us and eliminated a lot of the barriers. So I'm going to tick off quite a number of what those are that are no longer problems for us, and a couple of recent changes that help too. Mail voting is easier now because you can now apply for a mail ballot online. Couldn't do that before. Now any voter can use a mail ballot or an emergency mail ballot without needing an excuse for why they can't visit their polling place on election day. So no burdensome, proof of why you can't do that. It's a choice now. The requirement that mail ballots be either signed by 2 witnesses or notarized is gone. I mean, that was an enormous barrier for a lot of people. Instead, voter signatures are now verified using their registration records and a 4-tier verification process, which is actually more secure than 2 random people signing. The bill requires every municipality to maintain at least 1 drop box where voters can drop off their ballots. So, if you don't get to the post office, you can just drop it off. It allows nursing home residents to opt in automatically to receive applications for mail ballots. So you can imagine what a barrier that was for older adults who are living in nursing homes, that they had to proactively apply every single time for a mail ballot. And this is a big one too. The Secretary of State is now required to have a toll-free telephone hotline. And the telephone is big, right? Because not everybody's online. To provide the public with information about the electoral process and any other information. And so that hotline is available in multiple languages. People just have to dial 211, another trusted source. The Secretary of State is updating the Central Voter Registry 4 times a year, and it's also reduced the application deadline for Braille ballot for people who have vision impairment from 45 days to 21 days before an election. I mean, 2 new changes that have happened recently. This is for younger voters, so this is a good one for any grandparents and parents listening. But for somebody who's going to be 18 by election day, if you aren't 18 by primary day, you're 17, you actually can register and vote in the primary. So that is a really exciting way to get some of our younger voters engaged in the civic process, and we know they're not voting in the numbers that they should. And finally, in the olden days, if you were unaffiliated or you wanted to vote in either the Democratic or the Republican primary, once you did, you were in that party. And so you had to actively disaffiliate then before you left the polling place, or you would have to go back in and do that. Now you don't have to do that anymore. You can stay unaffiliated. So that's just another, administrative hurdle that people, don't like, and kept people from voting in primaries who might, otherwise have liked to do it because they didn't, just want to go through that hassle. So a lot of barriers have been removed, and we're very excited about that. And another piece of work people should know that goes on that AARP doesn't do ourselves, but we support it, is the Governor's Commission on Disabilities actually goes and makes sure that all polling places on election day are accessible, and that the alternative voting machines are working, and that people can get into the polling places and assistance is there if they need it. So that's very actively done, and another important way that barriers are removed for people.
I was hoping you could speak about AARP Rhode Island's voter engagement efforts that complement your work at the State House and communities across the state, and particularly relating to the livable communities outreach.
So we're trusted information, unbiased, nonpartisan information on how, where, and when to vote, but also on all the other issues that people find confusing or intimidating, like how to protect yourself from fraud, how to understand Social Security and Medicare, which we all need, we all use, but really complicated to sign up for and stay on top of and make sure you're getting what you need. How do you find good information about caregiver support? How do you prepare for retirement? So we are the trusted source of information for all of those things. And I think that spills over into our advocacy work at the State House, because people know our only agenda is the quality of life of people over 50. And when we show up with the votes behind us, right, we're not shy about letting folks at the State House or in city halls and town halls around the state know exactly who's putting them into office and what we expect to see In terms of livable communities, that's such a great one because that's the most important issue for us at the local level, whether people have accessible, affordable housing that's near community amenities, people have access to safe transportation, including good, safe, well-lit, not bumpy places to walk, because a lot of us walk, and that people have access to open spaces, and again, just the gathering places and community that make our lives rich. So we are talking to mayors and town administrators all over the state regularly about what older adults and really people of all ages need in order for us to live our best lives.
So it's the other thing I want to mention that we haven't talked about too much because we're talking about voting, but we have an amazing group of volunteers. So when we talk to a mayor or a council leader or someone else at the local level, or we're advocating at the State House, our volunteers are there with us. And so town to town, we will have people who are voters, who are also engaged in their community, and the livable communities work. This is very visible. They will be working with their town government on issues that matter. And it's really compelling to have the voters themselves come and do that volunteer work.
And voting is such an important expression of how we see ourselves in a community that's really livable, because a huge part of what makes a community livable is that each of us feels included. And the way you sort of start with that is showing up with your vote, making your voice heard, and saying, this is what I want to see happen in my community. Right. We're all focused on the presidential election because it's just it's a hot one this year. But all of those races, all the way down the ballot, the more local it is, arguably, the more effect that person's going to have on your day-to-day life. So I really encourage everybody to take the time, learn who all the candidates are in your town, and figure out who's actually going to achieve the progress that you want in your life. And I can't stress that enough. So town council, mayor, school committee, pay close attention, because what they do is going to make a big difference in what your daily life is like.
And I really recommend, actually, on the Secretary of State's website, when you go and look up that you're registered and you put in your address, it'll also offer you a sample ballot to look at. Because one of the best things to do is actually look at that before you go to the polls. It'll be posted at the polls too, but and usually you can find, especially now online, you can find information about all those people who are on your ballot, and you may not know who they are. If they're running for school committee or they're running for city or town council, often you don't know who they are. So that sample ballot and using that to spend 15 or 20 minutes to just look up those people before you go to the polls can make your vote go where you really want it to go.
Right. And I think a lot of us start off being kind of shy about candidates and our local officials, but we shouldn't be. They represent us and they expect to hear from us. So as you're doing your research about who you want to vote for, show up at candidate events. Figure out who's running for the state house, for your local rep and your local senator. Get to know them. They want to hear from us. They want to know our names. They want to know what we care about. And we've seen this time and time again with our volunteers and our members who reach out to folks at the state house when we're trying to get something passed. They listen. They listen.
And take advantage of one of the best things about Rhode Island politics, because we know there's many things that aren't wonderful, is that usually your candidate will knock on your door. Mm-hmm. And take advantage of that moment. Something I used to do because I was an elected official, and I loved hearing what people cared about directly, because you don't get that all the time. And so people should take advantage when that person knocks. I know sometimes you feel like, oh, we're about to sit down for dinner, but if you could take the 2 or 3 minutes to, share what you care about with them, that can go a long way to having them represent people better.
That's really well said, and I appreciate those reminders. Sample ballot, that's great advice. I've done that before. Quickly looked them up. But right, I think there are certain communities that historically have just been underserved, or they don't feel represented, and so they feel isolated, and they forget that really that's what candidates all want, right? It's just, what are your priorities? What are your needs? And I think at times certain communities can feel like they're not informed enough or they don't know the right language or the processes, and that automatically means that their voice or opinions almost doesn't qualify. So I appreciate that a lot.
I just really want to encourage everybody to vote in this election and every election going forward. It really, really matters every single time. And I would say the more we, the 50 plus, show up, the more we get done.
And I want to add that go and vote for, president, which everybody is thinking about, but pay attention to those local electeds. Catherine mentioned this earlier. They have so much impact on our daily lives. And it's important that we know who they are, we vote for the person we really want, and then we stay in touch with them about how they can be helpful to us.
Yeah, I'll just add one little thing to that too. It's really exciting what's been happening in Rhode Island over the last few election cycles to see how Latino elected officials are really being so successful, being voted into office, and taking up more and more of the of the power in the state house and in city halls and in city and town council chambers.
Right.
And it's just really exciting to see.
When our government reflects all of us, it's our best government.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Right. And it's also because of, local organization, community serving organizations works that are really empowering these individuals. So thank you both for what you do as well. So Catherine and Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us and for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Belén.
Everyone, you've been listening to LNN Spotlight with AARP Rhode Island State Director Catherine Taylor and State President Elizabeth Howlett. Rhode Island Latino News is proud to partner with AARP Rhode Island in informing, educating, and empowering the community about the electoral process. I'm Belén Dumont, reporter editor for the Latino News Network and your host. Thank you all for listening.